then we start talking about peace. If you want peace, you start early. And I'm happy that the CDD is taking the initiative for us to begin having these conversations about the potential impact next year of some of the things currently happening. And we already know that there have been a lot in the last few months, especially this year, that will have implications for next year. And I'm happy that I get to moderate the conversation that we're about to have. But I want to quickly invite Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh, who is Executive Director of the CDD, with the opening remarks. And he will give us a sense of why this is important now, even with more than a year to go for the elections. So, ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for him as he comes here.
Good morning and welcome to the Ghana Center for Democratic Development. We're glad that you could make it here this morning for this conversation. As many of you well know, elections have been a mainstay of CDD programming since the center was founded some 25 years ago. When we were founded in 1998, Ghana had no experience of party or leadership turnover in government or in power through the ballot box. We had never experienced so-called regime change through the ballot box. So with the then 2000 elections looming, preparations for elections and election programming became an important part of CDD's work, leading then to the formation of CODEO and other things that followed. So we remained engaged with elections since then. Of course, we all understand that democracy is more than about elections, but it is about elections almost first and foremost. So we have remained very engaged in this area because, of course, you're not going to have a democracy that works for the people if the starting point is not secure. If you don't have free and fair elections, credible elections, you're not going to have the government with the requisite legitimacy and the requisite confidence to be able to manage affairs. When elections go bad, they're likely to lead to conflict and a disruption of the peace and stability. And I think we have to also add that in an environment such as ours, where constitutional checks and balances, or checks and balances generally in the period between elections, are very weak, elections have remained, for better or worse, one of the really, just probably, some would say the only real viable check that citizens have on their governments. We wish that it wasn't so, that there was a lot more we could do in the period between elections, and we try. But I think that for most Ghanaians, the election is the ultimate check of governmental accountability. So we have to take it seriously. Of course, and we know that to get it right, we have to start early, because, as it's almost a cliche now, elections, really the election is not an event, it's always a process, and there are many, many different milestones along that journey to December 7th. So there's a lot that needs to be done in the period before the elections. Then, of course, there is the usual apprehension that tends to surround our elections, especially when we're getting to the end of a government or a party or a president's 2-year tenure. I mean, a president's 2-term in office. That has been our history. So usually the 2-term, the end of the 2-term elections have tended to be attended by a great deal of apprehension. And so we, as we get into 2024, we of course have to prepare, have to anticipate a number of interesting challenges and begin to think about them early. And especially while, end of every 2-term tenure is an exciting moment for our elections, I think 2024 promises to be exceptionally so for reasons that must be obvious, I think, to you all. Which is what brings us here to really just do a status check of sorts, right? So this is just trying to gather here and share some thoughts on what the state of play is on the eve of 2024 as we enter 2024. What are some of the things that we need to take note of that have relevance for what's going to happen in 2024? And that is why we have gathered here to have this conversation. It's not a round table, even there's no table actually. So, and we don't even begin to talk about the shape of the table, but this is what we have called it historically. So thank you for coming to this meeting, and we're hoping that the discussions we will have here will inform not only our activities going forward in civil society, but that some of the learning and the lessons will also be shared with the various other election actors and participants. We've had here at CDD a very busy year with elections, even though and by that I mean not only with the elections in Ghana, through our West Africa Democracy Solidarity Network, WADEMOS, we've been very active in the region. We were in Nigeria for the elections. We had a pre-election mission to Nigeria for solidarity with our partners there. We were there on election day. We were involved with the elections in Sierra Leone similarly, and have just returned from a pre-election mission to Liberia, and will be there for election day work as well. All of that really preparing, also using that as an opportunity for us here at CDD to also prepare for the Ghana elections. So it's been a busy year for us when it comes to elections, and we are picking up a number of interesting lessons and learning. I'm sure some of our CDD staffers would be more than glad to share some of those experiences with you at today's meeting as well. So thanks, and I hope that we all have a fruitful day talking about elections, election 24. Thank you.
Prof, thank you very much. A big round of applause for him. So he set the tone for today. Now we know why we're here. If you look on the program, we're supposed to have Star Ghana, but I'll reserve Star Ghana for later. They'll come in and they would give us a thought or two about why, obviously, they are partnering CDD to do this. And I know Star Ghana does a lot of great work in this area. And Ibrahim Tanko is here. Ibrahim, thank you very much for all the great work. I had a chat with him a short while ago, and we had an agreement. So you'll hear him pretty shortly. But I want to bring in CODEO, the Coalition of Domestic Election Observers. And they are always at the forefront of doing this and helping us keep a close monitor on elections anytime it comes around. And I'm happy to say that joining us right now is Ambassador Francis Chega. He's a senior fellow here at CDD and Ghana CODEO. A round of applause for him, please.
Thank you, Evans, and good morning. You can see the difference between the two previous speakers and myself. They didn't come with any paper. They just have their small machines and made their speech. I think because of where I'm coming from, my age, I still have to use the papers. I'm delivering this remark on behalf of Reverend Dr. Fred Degbe and Mrs. Elizabeth Piles, the co-chairpersons of CODEO, who unfortunately cannot join us this morning because of scheduling conflicts. On their behalf and on behalf of the advisory board, I welcome all of you to this morning's program. Genuine democratic elections are fundamental rights of citizens and the collective manifestations of the people's sovereignty. National democratic constitutions all over the world, as well as international human rights documents of the United Nations, regional intergovernmental organizations, and other regional blocs, uphold the principle of transparent and credible elections to reflect the will of the people. One of the significant developments that give relevance to elections in democratic countries is the non-partisan election observation groups by domestic election observers. The preamble of the Charter of Democratic Election and Governance of the African Union states, and I quote, "Convinced of the need to enhance the election observation mission in the role they play, particularly as they are an important contribution factor to ensuring the regularity, transparency, and credibility of elections. In furtherance of efforts to promote transparency, integrity, and credibility of elections in Ghana, CODEO has played a very instrumental role in Ghana's democratic development. Indeed, CODEO, since its formation in 2000, has observed every election in Ghana, including the presidential, parliamentary, and other types of elections. It has contributed to an improved electoral environment by its independent and objective observation of polls and deepening citizen participation in electoral processes. In addition, CODEO has remained deeply committed to implementing activities and promoting electoral reform aimed at enhancing the transparency and credibility of the electoral process and poll outcomes. Thus, CODEO, in its post-election workshops, has generated several electoral recommendations and, at different times, initiated monitoring and advocacy groups to support the implementation of agreed reform measures. This year, as part of CODEO's role in promoting credible elections in Ghana, the coalition has embarked on various activities. Together with the Civic Forum Initiative and Star Ghana Foundation, CODEO organized a press conference in April to condemn the appointment of people of a partisan affiliation into our Electoral Commission. It also has been calling on the Electoral Commission to make conscious effort to build trust and confidence in the Electoral Management Board. During the by-election of Asim North constituency, the coalition trained and deployed observers to the constituency to help ensure credible electoral results. As part of its efforts to promote credible elections in Ghana, CODEO is seeking reforms to address the flaws and gaps in our electoral processes. Some of these reforms include: 1, making the Electoral Commission of Ghana establish clear legal and administrative procedures for handling irregularities by polling and coalition officials during public elections. 2, making the Electoral Commission institute a timely and transparent process for the publication of detailed polling station and coalition center results on the Electoral Commission's website ahead of the declaration of results of presidential elections. 3, getting the Judicial Service of Ghana to amend PNDC Law 284 to provide a shorter timeline for adjudicating parliamentary election petitions at the High Courts and Court of Appeal. 4, getting an enhanced affirmative action law that prescribes at least a 30% quota for women in governance and decision-making positions. And 5, but not the last, get electoral stakeholders to cooperate to combat the vote buying and misuse of incumbent status that are driving up the cost of politics and endangering the stability of our democracy. As a body that seeks to promote free, fair, and transparent elections, we view today's meeting as very important in articulating and driving the important conversations about these reforms and other measures ahead of the 2024 general elections. Today's meeting is also to help us deliberate on the various issues that have taken place this year and their impact on the 2024 general election. We hope it will give us the opportunity to know the recent electoral activities in Ghana and in other parts of Africa, and how CSOs can collaborate to achieve electoral integrity in Ghana. It is also our hope that together we can enhance the credibility of electoral outcomes in Ghana. I want to thank CSO Election Platform, CDD-Ghana, and Star Ghana Foundation for collaborating to organize today's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Francis Chega. And still, you are with us here at the CDD, and we'll shortly be delving into the details of the assessment of these activities that has happened this year and before, and its potential implications for next year. But I have a few dignitaries here I want to acknowledge. With us is Dr. Peter Boamo Tokuno. He's a Director of Inter-Party and CSO Relations with the NDC. Peter, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We have Grace Lee. He's a political counselor at the Canadian Embassy. Hello, Grace. Hello. Nice to have you. Bertha, also with the political officer at the Canadian Embassy. Hello, Bertha. Nice to have you. Oswald is the programs officer at Star Ghana. Hello, Oswald. Just say hi. Okay. We have Wendy Van Meel, DHMS, Netherlands Embassy, is here with us. Hello. We have Joshua AA, who is the PO at PHR at Netherlands Embassy as well, also with us. Great to have you. Charles Ama is the programs manager at the National Peace Council. Hello, Charles. Great to have you, Charles. And Joseph Wameko is the executive director, human rights representative, GH. Joseph, how are you? Great. And of course, Evans Nemako is here, director of research and elections at the MPP, and he's here. He's here with Peter McMenu. He needs no additional introduction. Hello, Uncle Peter. How are you, sir? Great. Well, you didn't hear Otokuno say he's senior chairman. Indeed he is. Indeed he is. So ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Dr. Kojo Asante. He's the Director of Advocacy and Policy Engagement at the CDD. He will do a presentation on the assessment of election-related activities in 2000 and 2023 and the implications on the 2024 elections. A round of applause for Dr. Asante for me.
Good morning. Right. So my brief is to look at some of the activities that we have been involved in 2023, mostly, and to see what lessons that we can gather from them and what the implications are for trying to secure a credible, peaceful, and transparent election for 2023. So that's what I will try to do. Okay. Yeah, a bit about the background, talk a bit about the 2023 activities, election-related activities, activities of CDD and CODEO, and then the lessons. We discuss a bit more about the lessons and what implications that it has for different actors going into 2023. So, as always, whenever you are getting to a second term of an incumbent, elections are always fractious. It's a very difficult election. In our de facto two-party politics, the incumbent, in a way, expects that there might be a turnover, but the opposition equally feels confident that it is their time, to the point that sometimes it almost becomes an entitlement, because there is a supposedly 8-year merry-go-round happening. So incumbents go to that elections, in most times very vulnerable, because also, and I think this is not just a Ghana phenomenon, it's an election phenomenon across the world, that if even the people have accommodated after 8 years, they feel like they need to change you. It happens in the US, it happens in other places, so on. So those kinds of dynamics always makes the elections contentious, where everybody feels that they need to fight to stay on, or they need change. Under the Fourth Republic, no political party has managed to stay in power after 8 years. So they break the 8, which will be the first if it happens under the Fourth Republic. This has been a mantra of the MPP as part of his campaign to win a third consecutive term, and of course that would challenge the NDC's expectations that it's time for another change. So this presentation, these are some of the background that we're going, the other dynamics that we can talk about later for this particular election. But then we draw on some of the activities that have happened so far, just to see what lessons or insights that it gives us going into 2023. Early this year, we had the appointment of 3 new EC commissioners in March 2023. Now, of course, Mr. Ambassador Chegat did mention already that CODEO did organize a press conference related to 2 of the individuals who were appointed to the EC Commission on the basis of their partisan affiliation. Since then, the NDC has petitioned the Council. The NDC petitioned the Council of State in April on the new appointees, and in August we did get a response from the Council of State, basically to say 2 things: that the appointments have been made, it follow procedure, but also that the Council of State basically the matters are beyond them and they cannot intervene. Right? So this is what we got from the Council of State. So we are basically now in some sort of a stalemate, right? And maybe to give a little context for those of you who maybe do not recall the press conference of CODEO and other collaborators, and the simple message was that the EC, as we understand it, both in terms of the constitutional text, is an independent electoral commission. And there are models of electoral commissions across the world where in some places you have cross-party representation. So either you have the Electoral Commission with independent commissioners who are expected to be neutral, politically neutral, and so on, or you make sure that every party is represented. So maybe you can turn the IPAC into an Electoral Commission, and that there are those versions as well. But our Electoral Commission has the former structure. And over the years, yes, there's always allegations that some commissioner has political affiliation or not. But it's the first time that we had an appointment where the person just is publicly known to have these, partisan affiliation and activities. And that definitely raised a serious challenge for the Electoral Commission, because the points were made about, almost in a dismissive way, that it doesn't matter who is sitting at the commission because it will not affect the results or it will not affect the counting and so on and so forth. But the public perception of a tainted Electoral Commission is a recipe for disaster. And when I talk about some of the experiences we have had in the sub-region, you would begin to appreciate that the perception of independence and neutrality is key. So we thought that we shouldn't really open the door for this practice to be enhanced. The next time you get another party in and says, oh well, the other party has their people in there, so now I'm going to appoint the general secretary of my party to be on the Electoral Commission. Now, in some cases, because actually if you look at the parastatals, the state and its different structures, there are places where I think in the past we've had a get fund board that was chaired by a general secretary of a party, or sometimes the youth, whatever. And even though those issues are raised, it is worse when it is an institution where the whole job is to basically regulate competition between political parties. Then you just cannot start from that premise at all. So it might actually, in some places, not okay, because it still raises questions about partiality and all of that, but it is worse when it has to do with competition among parties. And so we felt strongly that it is something that needs to be raised. So as I said, as at now, the issue is still standing, but it's a question that we have to address going into 2024. And I hope that we can address it. By-election. We had two by-elections, one in Kumewu in May and then Asin North in June. Relatively peaceful. EC preparations were satisfactory. Police, were there in their numbers. And in a way, we didn't have the bad history of by-elections that we have had in the past, where there's always violence when it comes to by-elections. These were mostly peaceful elections. But Todeo did report on incidents of vote buying, abuse of incumbency, and then in Asin North is the use of vigilantes, even though there was an explicit order that, that the police were going to deal with vigilantes. I was there and I saw vigilantes, operating. And I think it's going into 2024, we need to also be clear about the rules and how we're going to address this matter. Voter registration. So in March, after back and forth with Parliament, you recall that actually the EC first submitted this CI, I think in 2022. It did not late. And I think that's the crucial point. It's not been late. It was part of a pre-legislative process. In 2022, questions were raised by the Subsidiary Legislation Committee, some on the floor of Parliament. But eventually in March 2023, when Parliament constituted itself into a committee of the whole to consider the CI not as part of its formal process, but as part of, as I said, a pre-legislative process. They came to the conclusion that they were going to reject the CI as it's currently formatted. They wanted the EC to still maintain the guarantor system in the CI. So basically, almost like an advice to the CI, to the Electoral Commission, that they should go back and look at those things again. I don't recall if there was any agreement on whether they kept the centers at the districts which was being proposed as part of the continuing registration. But I know at least on the guarantor system, they wanted it included. Now we know that currently the current BVR exercise that's going on, the EC is relying on the current election regulation 2016 CI 91 as amended for guidance, and we know that the EC is 126. Oh yes, as amended. Yes, okay, yes, that's right. That we know that it's operating in 268 districts currently. 5 parties and a citizen. 5 of the 5 parties, we know the NDC is 1, CPP and others, and the citizen have also used the EC in different applications, trying to restrain the EC. The exercise is almost over if I count, but I don't think the application is still pending in court. So interesting. I don't know when it will be heard. And then also we know sessions of the Ghanaian public, CSOs and so on, have criticized the EC for this decision. The EC has been, standing on its ground that this is not the only exercise it's going to have. It's going to have another one in 2024 and so on and so forth. We can discuss the pros and cons of all of those issues as they have emerged. Then also for district level elections, we know that this is really democracy at the grassroots level. We've not always had a good turnout. The average has been about 33%, over the years, and that's been worrying. And I think it's sort of reflected in many ways on how people feel about their districts and their localities and so on and so forth. But there was an effort to try to gather some momentum towards the district level elections. In 2019, we tried to get mayors elected on partisan lines. Ghanaians were insisting on a no-party agenda at the grassroots level. So we have about 6,272 electoral areas, and then we are going to have representatives at district assemblies and unit committees, except for in Kranza North and South districts, who basically have an overlapping 4-year term, so they don't sit. Their term doesn't mature at the same time that others do. So they will have years later. But that is going to happen on the 17th of December, 2023. And I would like to really get a pulse of whether people are looking forward to the district level elections or not. We also had a stakeholder dialogue on the DLE. At the time, delayed publication of the election calendar, and now we understand, because I don't see how we could have held the DLE earlier on in, I think it was in October or September, we were going to do it, if we're not going to open the register. We are not opening the register since 2020, and that would have been, I think, a travesty. So it's good that has shifted, and now we at least we can open the register and give people an opportunity, particularly those turning 18. Then we've had tried to also look at how women representation could be addressed in the coming elections. I think everybody here knows the statistic, that out of the 6,000 or so and over assembly members, we have only 460 women. So in many districts, one can safely say that it's men that make the decision for everybody in the district. So, but it's shocking, because you would think that at the lowest level, it's the easiest entry for, maybe the money is not heavy, you can mobilize yourself, you can put yourself up. The fact that it is worse than the national, see that structurally there's something problematic about the current elections. Would it change in this DLE that's coming? It has to change, but I don't think we have done enough going into the election to be able to change this. So if in the next 2 or 3 months we really want to make a difference, then we need to really look at this very seriously. And also, voter apathy is a concern. And then a lack of transparency in DLE data. Even when Kodeo does observation, because of the numbers, electoral area, 6,000, you can't cover a lot of places. So that's, you getting good data about the quality of the elections is also a problem. Well, let me now talk about some of our experiences from the the sub-region in particular, but also the continent in 2023 and maybe sometimes earlier. So some of the positives is that, yes, when you embark on electoral reforms ahead of the elections, I think it makes a big difference. We experienced that positively after the 2012 elections, and then the election reform agenda that followed, that led us to the 2016 elections. I think we benefited a lot from that. Nigeria should have benefited from a very good electoral reform act, but they contrived to deny themselves those benefits. Progressive use of technology, and this is very pervasive on the continent now. Most people are using biometric voter registration and verification, and Liberia is just launching its own this year for its election. We have used it progressively for a while, so we've eliminated ballot stuffing and double registration, and we can't eliminate minors and foreigners voting and all of that, but it has gone a long way to clean the elections. And recently in Kenya, they introduced electronic transmission of the results, not in the numbers, but the actual pink sheet, the result sheet, so that you can get access to the polling station data in real time through a platform. Nigeria should have experienced this with this IREV, but again, it contrived to deny itself that opportunity. But Kenya worked very well. Candidates openly pledging peace, I think it was very successful in Nigeria. There was a lot of concern about the security in Nigeria, but I think the elites pulling together managed to successfully pull off an election that some people thought were even going to be postponed. Then adjudication of cases before swearing in, we've seen it in Kenya. I think generally adjudication of election cases is becoming a big issue on the continent, and just understanding the jurisprudence around these issues is something that we are all very interested, but also worry about, because there are contradictions in a lot of the decision making, and we really need to get some standardized way of assessing the quality of elections and whether somebody have won. And I think it's work that we'll continue to do. But one critical point is that it's easier when you have resolved those things before a person is sworn in. Once the person is sworn in, the expectation is that you can't really ask them to leave office. So we've oh yes. It's a very difficult one, and I think it's something that we all have to look at. Some say, the Kenyan one is too short, in terms of mobilizing, but they get through that. So it's an area that we have to look at, particularly if the cases are going to continue to go to court. And then also having a defined campaign period, and I think Mr. McMenu has been a champion of us having a defined campaign period for many, many years. We thought that we could try it in 2024, but I think that the time has not helped us. So, but it's something that we have to continue working on so that we can have these kinds of rules in place. It helps everybody in terms of the money that you spend on campaigning, but it's competition. So if one person is doing it, another person is not doing it, it's not going to work. So it has to be by law, set in place with clear modalities and enforced. Some of the negatives delays in the disbursement of funds for EMBs. It happened in Kenya. I think in Nigeria it was fine. In Sierra Leone it was fine. Liberia, I think there's a problem with that as well. Low levels of trust in EMBs, and this is also another feature that we are beginning to see in a lot of. EMBs, of course, would always have the public's attention, and even in our case, we've had declining levels of trust. But at least even in the intervening period, it tends to sometimes go up in during the election period itself, if the Electoral Commission begins to show performance. So, but ours have declined for a while now. So, and that trust is very important because it adds to the perceptions and so on and so forth if it's not checked. Rift between EMBs and CEOs. Now, so that's this is another CSO. Sorry, this is another matter that all of us who work in the observation space, we've seen election observers arrested in Zimbabwe for attempting to do a PVT, which is the parallel voter tabulation. If you don't know about the parallel voter tabulation, it is you sample polling stations, and you are able to accurately estimate the presidential results. So it's a system that is used to verify what the Electoral Commission puts out for the presidential results. In Zimbabwe, they were arrested before they could even finish the PVT, because the suspicion was that they will announce it before the Electoral Commission announced the results. So this is the basis on which the police arrested them, and so on. I think the prosecution is still ongoing. In Sierra Leone, the National Election Watch, which is a version of CODEO, indicated that I think after the Electoral Commission published 60% of their results, indicated that none of the candidates were going to meet the 55% threshold. And then immediately the Electoral Commission pronounced or released its results and said that the incumbent president has won by 56%. Now, immediately there was a big, attack on the CSO that was doing the parallel vote tabulation, to the extent that the national security issued a statement that they were basically enemies of the state, and put them under a lot of death threats and so on, and they had to basically escape, leave Sierra Leone, for their lives. So these issues are becoming problematic, and they really need to be handled. Everybody have to understand their role and their contribution to election peace and security. And I think we have to talk about it not just as a Ghana issue, but I think across Africa. Because when you begin to interfere with a citizen's rights, I can sit in my house and collate the results. Constitutionally, nobody, I'm not denying that right. And as an election that is transparent, everybody should be able to do that. In Kenya, that is exactly what the platform, you can actually take every single pink sheet and calculate it yourself. The parties do it, all other stakeholders do it. So everybody knows the numbers. It's not magic, right? Once you begin to close the space for all of these things, then it adds to the suspicion that there's manipulation going on. And then there was also inadequate coordination among CSOs. So CSOs were split in Sierra Leone. After the president was basically reinstalled immediately after the announcement. So in their case, the president was sworn in immediately after the announcement that night. In the coming days, the group of CSOs went there to go and greet the president and appeal to him that they are also capable CSOs who can be appointed into his government. So, so that became another issue. There's also the issue of misinformation, and I think in the conversation we'll talk about it. Campaign financing laws not being adhered to. So Nigeria has some good campaign financing regulations, but they didn't follow. Kenya Parliament found a way to prevent the regulations being implemented by the EC there. So that's also another lesson that I think with campaign financing, we need to find a real consensus among all stakeholders so that we do the things that will reduce the monetization of politics, which will threaten all our democracy. That one, if it keeps going the way it's going, I don't think anybody will benefit from that process. So issues to be addressed going into 2024 elections, president appointment and their impact on public trust in the EC. I think we've mentioned it, and hopefully we can discuss some more about how do we, this is, I don't want to say it's the elephant in the room because, if I use elephant, if I use a royal butterfly, it will be a problem. If I use, so no umbrella. So it's whatever is in the room that we have to look at and find a consensus around it. I think this is, for me, a very important issue. And then urgent reform of the results management procedures and systems. Everybody in the post-2020 election, we made it very clear that a lot of the litigation that arose from parliamentary election particularly was that there were no standard ways of correcting mistakes. So people were agitating, oh no, you can cross it, you can do this, these are the numbers, all of that stuff. We need very clear codified rules for addressing these issues. It can be done by legislation. It can be done even if it's administrative procedure. It just has to be standardized and everybody knows where they are around this thing. And we also did talk about the time frame for adjudicating parliamentary elections. We have already gone, we ourselves and CFI, IDEC have gone to see the Chief Justice around this matter. It's not as simple a matter, but it's something that at least I think has to be addressed, and we have to find a way to deal with it. Also, the lack of consensus between the EC and Parliament over the CI. Again, we should look at the principles. What are we trying to do? I have always said that we agreed long time ago that continuous registration is the way to go. Now, if we are implementing it and practically we cannot do everything that we want to do, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't it's like a binary choice. Either we are doing it the way we say we'll do it, or we don't do it at all. I think there must be a way around it. If the guarantor system is what is the mediating, agreement, we should go with that. The EC has said that the National Identification Authority one, where you have to swear, affidavit and all the other stuff, is a much robust process. We should use that because the NIA also uses a guarantor system. So I think we have to find a middle way so that we can put this registration process aside and concentrate on more, important reforms like the results management one, transmission of polling station results. There's also the BVR and its potential impact on participation in the DLE. Certainly, given the SASCA service numbers and so on, and some of the statistics that the EC have put out, there's still a lot of people that would have to be registered. And I mean, the issue is, for me, is simple. It's not, it's not easy for people to get to the districts. It costs, and we are talking about first-time voters. So we have to make it available closest, so that people can take advantage of it. If there's going to be another one, then, let's make sure we do it, well, so that everybody can participate. And the representation of women, but also to make the point that, if we could have taken advantage of this opportunity to improve the interest in the DLE. Yes, the registration alone does not guarantee that more people will turn out for the DLE, but at least we could make the point and push it. We didn't do that, and maybe we'll miss the opportunity again. And the representation of women, as I said, if we don't do anything, then we shouldn't see any changes in terms of the representation of women at district levels. Vote buying, what can we do to curb vote buying? It will reduce the cost for the parties. Also reduce the the cost overall for how much money is going into elections. But I think the OSP's made some efforts. We should all encourage institutions to work to try to curb because it's not. I've heard arguments where people say, "Oh, that's what the people want, so you should give them." I don't think you can build any nation with that kind of logic. Lack of legislation and inadequate public knowledge of abuse of incumbency. So we developed the first instrument in 2004 for tracking abuse of incumbency. It's very important for fair competition. And if you don't put rules around it, then anything goes. And I think the more you do that, the more people begin to feel the elections are unfair and so on. Both parties have used it over the years, but for the citizens, it doesn't help anybody. It's sometimes you get things done, in a rush, and then we don't benefit from that public spending. Lack of prosecution of perpetrators of violence. I'm still waiting to hear what has happened with the Asin North, violence. An eyewitness, for instance, I don't know where the police are. We've constantly told or tried to encourage the police to be giving us updates. They promise that they'll be doing it, but once in a while they go to sleep on it. So we have to keep reminding them about it. And then information and disinformation, as we know, that is always going to be a big part of the election challenges going into the future. I think in talking about the issues, I've tried to talk about the recommendations, so I wouldn't go too much into this. But the question about the EC commissioners, that we are still saying that we appeal to them to resign because there are some legal options that CODEO has looked at. If that option is not there, but I think we will say that is their sacrifice that they can make to Ghana. For me, that's the way I look at it. If they appreciate where we are coming from, I think that could be done. And I think the government can find other places, that they could easily serve. it is not about their competency and their capacity. I'm sure there are many other places where they can serve fully and without, without all that implication that we have for our elections. We also talk about continuing to appeal to the EC, but as I said, the EC process is almost done. So, and even the court cases have not been heard, so I don't know what effect that will have. Strengthening communication strategy to provide continuous, comprehensive, and prompt information to election stakeholders. At least I can say that the EC is communicating, and that's good. Even if it's standing at the same place and saying the same thing, it's still communicating. It's better that it's communicating than not communicating. So I think that should continue. And then undertake regular and structured stakeholder consultation throughout the electoral cycle. Elections is not a one institution or one person game. It's everybody. So you always have to work together with others to make elections credible. And I think that should be the approach. And then also making conscious efforts to improve relationship with the opposition political party. Dr. Tukona, when is the NDC going to IPAC? You address it. Okay, I hope today you make that, then we can all give you the red carpet and take you there. Then we'll solve that matter, and then we can move to something else. Passing the affirmative action bill, I think is important. Net rights, I hope they are here. The AAB bill, coalition, Parliament has only just about a month or so before we'll go on recess again. So we need to work very hard on the affirmative action bill. Intensify voter education for DLE, it's not too late, and then resolve the current impasse on the CI, and then strictly enforce the Vigilantism and Related Offences Act 2019, which would help curb any violence if it be happening. For CSOs, advocate for reforms ahead of 2024. Effective collaboration. We shouldn't do what the Sierra Leoneans did. Establish a collaborative platform, and that's what I commend, Alaji Tanko and all of those who've created the CSO platform on election. Continue to do voter education and participate in awareness creation of vote buying and abuse of incumbency. Thank you very much.
Hello? Great. I mean, this was a very thorough presentation and lays the foundation for a conversation that we're about to have. And is Executive Director of the Ghana Integrity Initiative. And Kweku Krobi Asante is a communications lead at the Media Foundation for West Africa. And since we are assessing these activities and its potential impact, I want to start with some of the activities that Dr. Kojo Asante talks of. And the first one on the list is one that he touched on, which civil society had taken on the appointment of the two individuals to the commission. Civil society did a press conference on this. The NDC wrote a petition to the Council of State. But like most things in Ghana, it's gone. I mean, we're talking about other things now. Does that suggest that for the voting public, and if you look at the experiences from the rest of the continent, Dr. Kojo Asante touched on how trust in election management bodies is low across the continent, all the places that they touched on. The fact that we've almost forgotten about it, such a big issue that came up, that civil society got involved, that's also just for the voting public. Maybe it's not a big deal for them going into the 2020 elections in the way it relates to trust in the election management bodies. Should we take it then that because we've forgotten, we're not talking about it anymore, Council of State has replied, nothing has changed, we can just simply move on to 2024 and it won't become an issue that further heightens the tension surrounding an election? And I want to throw that to Mary, if you want to take that for me. Yes, we can hear you.
Some of the times we expect to hear the advocacy out there, without which we believe nothing is going on. And so perhaps the critical role of the media in this space is also very important. If we are talking about the issues and nobody is putting it out there, then it's like nobody hears it anyway. But I'm very sure that you are aware from Kojo's presentation that there is a election group that is currently working, and you've heard also of Kodeo, which is trying to do beyond what we have done necessarily in the past. So considering issues around litigation is also important. However, the issue continues to remain relevant, very relevant. Perhaps as government has stated, they do not see any wrong doing in appointing qualified Ghanaians to represent. Civil society sees this issue as an ethical one, where persons who have reflected the views and ideologies of the current government being put in an election management body to superintend our upcoming elections, where we all are aware that the stakes are very high. It's wrong. It continues to remain wrong, and we should all continue to not to countenance it at all. And I believe it is only civil society who can do this. We should continue to talk about it, make the citizens out there continue to engage, because it is the citizen who can bring about the change. If we do not insist on some of these things, we will continue to have them perpetuated, and at some point it will boil over and we would not have an option. So we continue to remain resolute in this case, and we believe that government should listen. Perhaps in recent times we have seen that whatever we have said goes on deaf ears. However, we believe that we will continue, like Kojo said, to make those appeals that the right thing should be done. If it is not against the law, it is ethically wrong. And we want to cherish and grow the democracy we all have. We do not want people on the streets. We do not want elements that do not want the good of this country to infiltrate and take this country to where others are currently. That is not what civil society wants. We want to see very proactive systems in place, institutions which can affirm that we know for sure that everybody votes, and people would certainly vote for parties. But let us pick those who have not, on platforms that have been recorded, shown that they belong to certain groups, be appointed to represent all of us. That is wrong.
And it's about also the perception, right, going into the elections next year. It hasn't been dealt with. what really can be done about this to deal with the perception? It goes to many of, and CDD's Kojo Asante mentioned, what the EC itself does. Already there are concerns about, the limited voter registration exercise. The NDC has issued a statement, has written. It appears everything is adding up to a very tense atmosphere next year. But looking specifically at this subject now, CDD and civil society are doing something the background, as Mary had said, but sufficiently. I just want to take recommendations around the table. What should be done to, using this as an example, I mean, dealing with this appointment, the council says nothing can be done, right, in terms of removing them from the commission. Okay, so if nothing can be done, and yet we are concerned about its potential impact, the problem remains, right? So how do we deal with it? I guess it's why we're having this roundtable conversation. Not exactly a roundtable. So how do you deal with that at the perception level and at the reality level?
Well, Evans, thank you very much. I think Mary has highlighted the point that CSO has a very big role to play in terms of these two appointments that have been made. My recommendation is that, I was actually very happy when Dr. Kojo said that they are exploring some legal options. And I think we shouldn't stop just at pleading or encouraging governments to do the right thing, exploring the legal options to show some seriousness. And you mentioned that it's not a big deal. It's actually a big deal. It's a seed that have been sown that we are likely to reap during the election. Because these are individuals that have been clearly close. You know what, at times when commissioners are appointed, you have allegations that they belong to party A or party B. But this is the closest we have come. This is the closest we have come with pictures and audios. And I think it's something that government might take seriously. Well, I've seen the petition, Council of State, but I think what can be done, we can explore the legal options as well and see what can come out of it. Because it's still relevant, like she's saying. It's a seed that have been sown. The public, and I mean the voting public, we are part of it. CSOs are part of citizens. So the voting public are not somewhere else. We are people sitting here. So it's a matter that's very relevant. We can consider the legal options and see what will come out of it.
Eunice?
I support the ideas that have been shared. And I think that as we look at short-term responses, for example, re-emphasizing the call on the government or the one that did appointment to recall the appointment, but also those who have been appointed to reconsider their influence and also the perception, the increasing perception of the public that the EC is no longer neutral. But I think that in the long term, my proposal would be for us to go back to the Electoral Reform Committee's recommendations. I think that one is about the consultations around the nomination of members to the EC. And I don't think in this case that was done. We need to recognize that election is public business, that there are interested individuals, groups, and etc. And we cannot make certain decisions without, creating opportunities for conversation. So I think that is one. There's also been recommendation that at least those that have been recommended are, vetted or interviewed somehow by Parliament. And I think Parliament is a space where you can say that there is a balanced representation of the political parties and the different groups that are affiliated to them. So I think that in the long term, we should go back again to the Electoral Reforms Committee and those recommendations that came up that some were rejected and see how we can take them forward. They will be very, very relevant.
Well, just to add up, I think I strongly agree with the position that Kojo just presented. I think that going to court will be the best option now, really. And this is very serious in the sense that over the years we've had some of the political parties making allegations about how not neutral the Electoral Commission body is. But this is perhaps the most frontal of it is that we can all agree, even the CSOs can agree that this did not go well, and I think that in places where you find strong repudiation to election results and credibility to the outcome of elections, these are some of the issues that begins to build up. It doesn't happen. It builds up from one to the another, to the another, to the another, and when it hits the crescendo, people begin to stand outside and begin to protest, and that's where you feel the chaos. And so it is proper that at least we try the law and see what would come out of it, and then maybe we could make progress.
I mean, on this subject, we have political representatives with us, and I think it's appropriate just to hear their views on how they themselves perceive dealing with this problem going forward. And senior chairman is with us, Peter McMenu. I don't know if you want to offer a suggestion on this particular. Clearly, civil society feel very passionate about this subject. It was number one on the list of Dr. Kojo Asante, and definitely has to be dealt with in some way or form. Peter McMenu, if you want to chip in for us.
Well, having sat with the Electoral Commission at IPAC over the years, we have not always liked the way the Commission's operations, guidelines, and even CIs have gone through Parliament over the years. I think that, just as Kojo said, we in Ghana have chosen the independent commission. Other jurisdictions have the multi-party one where political parties, CSOs, serve on the commission. What we have chosen is for the individuals who make the commission to be outwardly independent. Right. This is a matter that has come to the public domain. It's still under discussions. That's why it's still here. So for me, I would like to see how it pans out. The members of the advisory body to the Council of State were petitioned by the NDC. They've come out that, as far as they are concerned, they have washed their hands of it. Yeah, that was in August.
Yeah.
So let's wait and see what other options, if any, and if genuinely we can pursue it. But let us also remind ourselves that we may also have to look at, as she rightly pointed out, the Electoral Reforms Committee recommendations, because I could remember that recommendations envisaged some changes in the way appointments to the Electoral Commission are done. Don't let us underestimate or undercut that, because it is important that if we have realized that things like this have happened, going forward, how do we reform the system to avoid its occurrence? So that's another way we have to look at it. But for me, I've gone through the electoral system with the IPAC, and most of the appointments in the previous years were skewed. We bore the pain, but we sat and went through it and won the elections in 2016. I can tell you. So if we put it in the public domain that Mr. A or B has been found as a lecturer, a TESCON patron at Sunyani Polytechnic, so the entire electoral process should break down, I beg to differ. Because I've gone through that and I won the elections in 2016. So let us reform. I mean, if we all do accept that Ghana has chosen the independent, impartiality, electoral management body. What reforms do we put in place to avoid future appointing authorities from putting up that kind of...
Any single one you recommend before I hear from Otokono to deal with it?
Oh, we have said it several times that one, they should go through parliamentary process. Okay, we have said that in various recommendations.
They should be subject to parliamentary approval.
Yes, they should. And then there is also the question of tenure of office. Ghanaian's system is that the electoral commissioners up to is it appeals court or Supreme Court level, they cannot be sacked. But in Africa, if you go to Nigeria, Kenya, etc., they have limited period to serve, tenure. That's important, because when people are given that unlimited tenure, they become solely headed and think that they can do whatever they like because the constitution protects them. So we must also look at the tenure. People have done well, like Professor Jiga of Nigeria, but his tenure, at the end of his tenure, he had to leave. He did very well.
Peter, let me hear your thoughts on that.
Okay, Evans, thank you. I think that I would ask permission to stand so that I can speak. Okay, so I want them to see me so that they don't look behind my head. Evans, I think that this is a very great awakening. And we in the NDC holds the opinion that the Electoral Commission remains the spine of our democracy. And for the Electoral Commission to become efficient, its lifeline, its heartbeat is trust and integrity. Trust and integrity also is not a commodity that is bought on the market. It is earned. And how do you earn trust? How do you build integrity? First, it starts from somewhere. So, for example, you want to trust somebody, but the person being put in that position, before he's put there, you know, holds a particular opinion that, you know, portends a threat to the trust that you are supposed to have in that institution. When the person is put there, no matter how good the person functions, you will still have a problem because it starts with the perception. And so you would recall that before Jean Mensah was appointed to the Electoral Commission, some of us raised concerns because Jean Mensah had been a player in the political space for a while, and we had engaged her severally, and we had had issues with her, and we had made claims that we think that she is not independent in thinking and in action. And so once she was appointed, we raised that concern. But you see, that brings also into question what Dr. Kojo Asante mentioned, the role of the media, and, you know, we raising issues and the media taking it seriously and everybody discussing, CSOs getting involved and all that. I recall at the time, perhaps maybe CSOs felt that, oh, she's one of us, so let's keep quiet and all that. But the quietness, the non-discussion, the non-engagement after her appointment is perhaps what emboldened the president. Remember that after her appointment, some deputy was also appointed. And that deputy, we also know very well, as a TESCOM patron, we have raised concerns. We raised thorough concerns. Nothing was done. He has performed. We have seen his posture. We have seen the way he talks. We've seen the way he acts. And still, there is no element of independence in that person's posture. Yet, nobody was supporting the cause. Nobody said anything. CSOs were quiet. So what you do is that you embolden the appointing authority because you were quiet. And so now we take it a notch higher. Now let's go and pick activists who are openly known on TV. I do not agree that this is the worst one, because actually MPP appointees, activists have been appointed already and we were quiet. But just that this one has been taken to another notch higher. And we have open activists appointed to the Electoral Commission. I say that, look, it is a function of a system that we have built for ourselves. All the options we are talking about, and I hear us talk about go to court, go to court. The same scenario is also happening in the courts. Integrity of the courts are now in question because of the way we appoint our judges. We are appointing party activists. And the rulings of the courts is evident for us to see that we are moving in a particular trajectory, which is corrupting and, as it were, destroying the institutions of states that are supposed to be.
And Peter, briefly, I mean, so what solution then will you offer?
So I'm heading
there. Chairman recommends one.
So interestingly, the courts, for if you ask me, may not even be an alternative, because
what's the alternative?
Because the court has also its own problems. I think that the fundamental solution to solve this once and for all is to relook at the entire Electoral Commission, the composition of the commission. We would have to look at the entire composition. Perhaps we may want to look at a commission where we would say that institutions, various institutions of society are represented. And with that commission, the chairperson of the commission is internally selected, such that you take the hands of the president, you take the hands of politicians from the selection of the electoral commissioner. Otherwise, we would be running in circles.
Okay.
If you ask any politician to appoint somebody, I mean, we have seen in this country where this is not the first time we are appointing an electoral commission chairperson. We have done so. Afarijan did a wonderful work, and we all commend Afarijan. I mean, he went through his period. He didn't have any tenure, but we respected his integrity and the trust that he sought to exude in the line of duty. We saw Charlotte Osei appointed, and I have been struggling where, I mean, for Charlotte Osei, nobody had any problem with Charlotte Osei before her appointment. She was
really
even,
sure about that.
Yeah, no, Ivan.
So, but because of the interest of time, you've made a suggestion, and I think we can discuss that.
No, so Ivan, just
if we can wrap up for me in a minute, so
I just wanted to make a point from that.
Very briefly. I just have a minute.
So you see, she was the chairperson of the NCC, another independent body, and I had nobody, raise concerns about the party affiliation and all that before she progressed to that office. Now, following from the action of removing her, where everybody was quiet. In fact, that was novel. I never thought that was possible.
The 1 minute is...
So it's something that has been built.
Okay.
By the ruling.
But I take the proposal you make that in essence.
And it's not surprising that the citizen on the citizen side, we are also becoming very intelligent. I am saying we because it's we all as citizens. We've realized that the distribution of the national cake has become skewed. And so there is a lack of inclusion when it comes to political decision making, when it comes to participation, and then when it comes to the development outcomes as well. And so you realize that apart from the vote buying, vote selling, which we need the regulations for, we see citizens actively engage in this process because they believe that at certain points in their lives during the electioneering cycles, they need to make money. They are either consultants, they are either party polling agents, or they are party activists at the community level. This we need to deal with. And they are enjoying, that is it, the TVs we have seen, the work we have done on monitoring abuse of incumbency and also electoral corruption has seen evidence from all the parties, be they small or large, paying their widows' mite to get themselves elected. And we see an erosion of trust in the decision-making process. We also see that our development is skewed, because if you give me money to vote for you, it means whatever you do for me is what we would get. And we want the law changed, amended, to ensure that, one, we have a period within which we campaign. I have been to Denmark and I realized they do campaigning for just about 3 months, and that is it. After that, nobody does anything. And even the day after the elections, everyone is supposed to go out there and remove their posters. I think it is possible in Ghana. There's no reason why we shouldn't do that. If at least we don't want the 3 months period because people would want to engage in other things, we should see policy talking to perhaps a year of active campaigning. Yesterday I was in a forum where somebody was proposing perhaps we extend the period of governance, and the reception to that by the citizenry, you would realize we are beginning to not appreciate some of the things our politicians are doing to us. And so we should pay attention. We must be paying attention to some of the sentiments that are coming from out there. Let's reduce the campaigning period. And let's also put in some limits to the financing. It is very critical. We see that people, I remember the last time there was a convening here, the political parties were asking us, so if somebody gives me money, how do I know the source of the person's money? That is, the onus lies on you to determine whose money you are accepting. And if we have the law spelling out some serious sanctions to dissuade some of our political parties from taking this money, because the research showed that they were taking money from galamseyers and from some very serious criminal sources. And they indicated that they couldn't tell us where those monies were coming from. But if our law is so robust, if our law does not tolerate that, and also, apart from the law, we have all spoken to the fact that are we what we need as a people is to ensure that the laws bite. If the laws are robust and we do not apply them, we would come back to say that our campaign financing is not robust enough, and so monetizing our elections is one of the things that is continually increasing, leading to corruption, serious corruption in the public space. People, and also the impunity of it, you can all attest to, and we see that political capture is becoming very prevalent.
And Paul, from the perspective of voters, though, because when the process is monetized, the politician's justification is that when they go to campaign, their request is there. And so they can't leave and not supply, right? So from the perspective of voters, what's your recommendation? Because the suggestions that we've imposed is change the campaign finance and laws, etc., make it hard for the parties to feel obliged to spend. But isn't the demand also that they feel they have to necessarily meet? How do you deal with that, aspect of the challenge whilst you're solving it from the legal point of view? I'll take you and I'll take you, and then we could wrap up.
Yes, very well. So then it means it also come to the point where we have to educate citizens, especially on the dangers of vote buying and the implications it has on our democracy. Whilst you are dealing with the issue from the political party side of view, citizens will have to also be admonished on how dangerous vote buying or taking money because you want to vote for somebody, the implication it has on our democracy. But I was also looking at it from this point of view. It's a very difficult thing, and it's actually likely to intensify in 2024 because there's a negative relationship between the status of the economy and the quest of citizens trying to see election period as a cashing point. So, I'm struggling, and I think this election I'm supposed to get this particular amount of money. So there's a negative relationship. The higher the cost of living, citizens would like to use that particular medium to get enough. So it's also housed in the broader structural issues, not alone issue not just elections, but the status of the economy actually also influences the way citizens will want to see that particular as an avenue. But what we can do from the perspective of citizen is also to continue what we are doing as CSOs and educating and admonishing citizens on the dangers of vote buying. That is what we can do from this point of view.
I think Mary made a point that I would want to reiterate, that if, as a state, we were distributing resources equitably, then the incentive on the part of citizens to make demands of their leaders during elections would be reduced. But what we see is that our resources are not distributed equitably. So we have those who have more and accumulating more, and those who are getting poorer and poorer and poorer. And so I'm being provocative, that we don't only have vote buying, but we also have vote selling. That citizens know that the only time that they will get something from their leaders is when the leaders need them to vote for them. But it's not that it is right. So the point he made about and there have been instances where citizens do take the money and they don't vote for you, you know. So then it just tells me that there's awareness that this money is ours anyway, and so I will take it, I will not vote for you. I think that going forward, some recommendations have come up, the campaign financing regulation, but you know that also the debate about whether the states with its limited resources should commit to funding political parties. But there's also the bigger debate about how do we protect the integrity of elections? How do we ensure that we have good governance if we do not deal with the issue of money being the reason why some people come into office? And I think I just want to link the growth in monetization to women's political participation. And the General Secretary of, is that the PNC?
PNC, yes.
PNC talked about resources being a main barrier to women accessing political spaces, etc. And so the more we have money determining who becomes elected, the more and more women would be out of the political space, and we need to check that.
Thank you
so
very much.
sensitization is important in addition to the legal actions.
Ladies and gentlemen, round of applause for our panelists. And that's Eunice, Paul, Mary, and Kweku. And as we wrap up, I'd like to now invite the Star Ghana to obviously give us a few comments, because they've made this possible in partnership with the CDD. And so, ladies and gentlemen, please help me with a round of applause. Welcome Ibrahim Tanko Amadou, who is the Executive Director, Star Ghana Foundation.
All right. Thank you very much. I think after this very engaging conversation, I will not spoil your appetite by adding any more. It's just to say that this event has been organized by the civil society platform on elections. We've realized over the years that while civil society has been doing a lot around elections, most of it is uncoordinated, resulting maybe in duplication, resulting in some areas not being addressed, but also in resulting in the use of our the resources, not getting the maximum out of the resources. Part of the challenge, of course, has been the way donors fund civil society actions, particularly around elections. Competitive bids do not engender collaboration, because we are competing. Everybody is trying to write their proposal. And then when you win it, when you get the resources, it means that you are committed to working just specifically around what the donor is funding. And so we've thought that it is necessary to look beyond that to find areas where we can collaborate. We've been doing this since the 2016, and more recently after the 2000, 2020 elections. This is one of the events we are organizing. We're also looking at a few more around specific thematic areas. And I would think that maybe as we talk about civil society coordination around the election programming, we should begin to look at how we can bring in the media as part of the alliance or the coalition that works around ensuring that our elections are peaceful, they are credible, they are transparent, and they promote good governance in this country. So I would like to thank everybody for coming. I'm not the one giving the vote of thanks, but on behalf of the platform, I would like to say thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And that, by the way, is Abraham Tanko Amadu. He's executive. Ibrahim. He's executive director of the Star Ghana Foundation. And that, by the way, is how we draw the curtain on this conversation. There's a lot there that we've had to sort of imbibe ahead of 2024. And as we do that, this will filter into the conversations definitely in the media. But at least it's creating awareness about some of the key issues ahead of 2024, and also creating a platform to discuss it thoroughly, so we know the threats and deal with it in a more systematic way. So thank you very much, panelists, for joining us, and thank you all for coming. And I must quickly announce as we go that Mary had her phone dropped somewhere. If you find it, please.